US has placed sanctions on a Malaysian company called Jetronics. MITI came out with a statement to say that this company is actually not E&E manufacturer. They are just a trading company. These are one of the 300 companies highlighted in US action against these companies having dealings with Russian companies. Welcome back to the Are We OK podcast, where we talk about public policies in ways that are relevant to you guys. My name is OKM.
And I am Peter, Mr. Money.
So I should actually call myself OKM Mr. Botak, is it? Mr. Money, Mr. Botak.
Maybe you should call yourself the One Punch Man.
One Punch Man, yes.
One Punch Kautimo the policy.
Well, I wish it was that simple. I wish it was that simple. But yeah, but before we go into the policy issues and the politics, anything of interest happened to you over the past week or so?
There are quite a lot of things that happened. But I think I'm quite looking forward for a trip to Sabah.
Yes. We've talked about this. Yes, Jelajah Sabah.
That's right.
What are you looking forward to, in terms of going to Sabah?
I think I paid visits to Sabah. Definitely in terms of personal reasons. I like the fish there, the seafood.
Okay,
fantastic.
And not to climb Mount Kinabalu.
If we have the chance, why not?
Maybe the young people are in this office.
No. However, this time around, I'm more excited because we will be able to arrange some interesting interview with different personnel there. Hopefully, meet some ministers, some member of parliament, and then meeting some of the businesses there. I think one of the topics that we also want to go there and do is actually to explore the living cost in Sabah itself.
Yeah, cost of living, and then
Yes.
maybe opportunities to do business, look
That's
at the
right.
tourism sector.
That's right. One interesting group of people that would love to meet is teachers from Sabah.
Why do you want to meet teachers?
We have been always hearing about like Sabah's education. Some of them, they have to travel really far.
Yep.
The condition of the schools and the quality of the teachers' education and training development kind of things. I think it's great if let's say we can meet some teachers there to actually explore what are some of the areas that needs to be improved. What are some of the things that the current government is doing well or can be improved will be great.
Something interesting to think of, and I will also try to reach out to some of my contacts to see whether they know any teachers in the ecosystem. So let's start with the first hot topic for today. Speaking about industry, one of the industries in the news lately is the semiconductor space. We talked quite a bit about it last week from the perspective of the National Semiconductor Plan, the plans that have been announced and probably will be announced more of the National Semiconductor Strategy. Just before coming here, I saw an announcement that a Belgium company called NXP has partnered together with a TSMC-linked company called Vanguard to build a new chip-producing facility, a foundry in Singapore. But something that's closer to home, there was a news report that US has placed sanctions on a Malaysian company called Jetronics, Jetronics, for selling certain electrical components or electrical items to a Russian company. And this Russian company is on a blacklist because they could be using some of this equipment to build military type equipment, and maybe some of this is deployed in the war in Ukraine. So when I read about this, I was obviously concerned because the worry that I think many people have would there be any sort of like other Malaysian companies that would be involved in this kind of dealings? Thankfully, MITI came out with a statement a couple of days after this news was announced to say that this company is actually not E&E manufacturer. They are just a trading company. These are one of the 300 companies that were sort of like highlighted in US action against these companies for purportedly having dealings with Russian companies. So I shared some of the news with you. What did you think about this?
Well, I thought it was really interesting because when I first read the news, I was shocked myself, right? Because just the week before, we were talking about good news in semiconductor industry, right? And immediately I was thinking, how could this affect the inflows or possible business opportunity that could have came out from the new initiative by government, right? When I read about the company, siapa tu?
Never heard of them,
right? So like, okay. So I guess even if they're big, they couldn't be that big lah. So I guess the good thing was that when MITI came out with it to make a statement about it, that kind of like cleared the air a bit. But it was quite interesting because the fact that they are actually just a trading company,
but
but they managed to trade military grade or potentially military grade components. And it just makes me wonder what's going on in between the deal and how much they could have made out of it to take this kind of risk.
Yeah, so just for your information, that this could likely fall into a category of what we call dual use equipment. Dual use means it can be used for commercial purposes, it can also be used for military purposes. And for these kinds of equipment, it falls under the purview of MITI through the Strategic Trade Act 2010.
Right.
Meaning, if there's any possibility, whatever that is being bought and sold through Malaysia, maybe even produced here, to other parties that where we suspect, or other countries that we work closely with suspect that this could be used for dual use. So for the sake of argument, I use some components in walkie-talkies, right? The components in these walkie-talkies can be used for commercial purposes. You use it in an oil rig or something. But it can also be used in communication equipments that are deployed in the battlefield, for example. Right, so under this Strategic Trade Act, there are avenues whereby Malaysia can conduct our own investigations. And I think this is a good warning or good signal to MITI that MITI should be diligent about this because of all the different wars and conflicts that are going on. And it's a pertinent issue because not only is there this conflict going on in Ukraine, but we also have the Gaza conflict.
That's right.
So are any of the things that are being bought and sold in the electrical space, E&E space, are they being used by certain people to maybe even deploy in a dual use basis in the battlefield in Gaza?
That's right.
So the Malaysian government through MITI has the right to go and investigate these kinds of cases and maybe do some preemption instead of waiting for the US to do this.
Now that you talk about it, I think that because Malaysia is sitting in a very unique position where we are kind of like the neutral party everywhere we go, right? Same thing as Singapore as well as a neutral party. Means that there needs to be some sort of prevention that needs to be done. I recall last time when we buy a certain controlled medicine, we can just buy it off without writing names, right? Subsequently, in order to control it, they got everyone writing names. Could there be such a policy to be set up, right? Where if any company that is known to deal with any kind of dual components, they need to register the buyer and seller, or like I sell to who and what would be used for. Kind of declaration to kind of like prevent, right?
For some items that are definitely high on the list of dual use possibilities, probably there needs to be more scrutiny. But like I said, even things like walkie-talkies and all that, can be used for dual use. So I think for this particular case, MITI needs to investigate things like, for example, custom invoices, freight forwarding invoices that are where these items are sold to Russian company, maybe directly to Russia or maybe through an intermediary in another country. So I think those kinds of things need to be made clear. And of course, we can get this kind of information from the US government because it's not just one Malaysian company that's been hit. Over 300 companies was hit and from different parts of the world. My suspicion is that there are probably a couple of Russian companies that are being targeted by the Americans. Maybe the Americans managed to hack into one of the systems or some file in terms of all the list of invoices was obtained by the American authorities, and then they went through the list and then found these 300 companies, and then they announced an action against all these companies. So they're not targeting Malaysia specifically, but it's definitely a warning sign. We need to be vigilant on our own shores on these things.
I think Malaysia is kind of on a very interesting place where we are kind of like on a watch list for quite many items, right?
Last month, there was the news item about the US Treasury officials coming to Malaysia to show us evidence that there was possible sale and transportation of Iranian oil into Malaysia. Offload in the Straits of Malacca and then brought into Port Klang. I think this is part and parcel of how we need to be vigilant. Another issue that's related to this, the larger issue of the US government taking actions against certain companies, including some in Malaysia and in the region. There was a news item that came out this week saying that the US has actually temporarily banned solar PVs that are being exported to the US from certain companies in Southeast Asia. Malaysia was one of them, Thailand, and I think Vietnam was also one of them. And it affected one of the largest solar PV producers in Malaysia, a Chinese company called Longji, Longi. They have 3 production facilities in Malaysia, one in Kuching, one in Bintulu, and a new one in Serenda in Rawang. Right. So following that, Longgi had to announce they had to reduce some of their operations here in Malaysia because even if they, let's say they produce temporarily, they can't sell it to the US. When you sort of like read this news as a layman, do you get the impression that the US is unfairly targeting companies that are in Malaysia, even if let's say these companies are not really Malaysian owned but foreign investors coming from places like China to invest in Malaysia?
I wouldn't think of it as unfairly treating Malaysia. I think they're just unfair to many countries. Yeah, that's number one. I think they are a very interesting country, which I want to ask actually is that, I mean, this all has to do with the whole anti-dumping policy kind of thing, right? Yeah, which is to protect their own local businesses from other people importing items that are more cheaply made and they can sell it cheaper. It's kind of like what we did with Proton, put it this way. And America, I think it's really interesting because they always talk about free market, but they seem to talk about free market in their own terms.
Of course. They want to protect their own interests.
When they think it's good, then it's a good free market. When it's a bad free market, then suddenly they can become communists just at the turn of the switch, right? Yeah.
But I mean, even American companies, I don't necessarily think that they are, looking at this kind of action in a favorable way.
Yeah.
By American companies, I mean including those who are operating in Malaysia, for example.
Yes.
First Solar is one of the biggest solar PV producers in Malaysia and around the world, and they produce a lot in Kulim and then they export it back to the US. But I think on this point, what I want to also explain to the audience, right, is the way these kinds of anti-dumping actions are taken, right, it is usually at the behest of certain companies in the home country that file anti-dumping petitions against companies that they suspect are selling certain items below the cost of production in other countries. Right. So they've identified a couple of companies, quite a number of companies actually, in the solar PV space in Southeast Asia, right? So it is not all of the companies in Malaysia that are producing solar PVs that are affected. So for example, Hanwha Q Cells, which is a Korean company, that wasn't affected. First Solar, American company, wasn't affected. Even a Chinese company that's relatively big in Malaysia called Jinko, that's based in Penang, that produces and sells solar PVs to the US, they were not named as one of the people or the companies in this anti-dumping petition. So it was a few other companies, many of them coming from China but operating in Southeast Asia, that were named. So every country actually has a right to undertake these kinds of anti-dumping actions, including in Malaysia.
Yep.
If let's say, for the sake of argument, steel companies in Malaysia, they find that other entities in Southeast Asia or China, they are dumping steel, certain steel products such as wire rods and bars into the Malaysian ecosystem at below cost. They can file a petition. And then, what I think Malaysia, through MITI, needs to do in this particular case would be to make sure that those actions are sort of like undertaken quickly and effectively to protect our own industry. Right. So just as what the US is doing, protecting their own industry, because there's this petitions that have been filed, we should also be quite proactive, because ultimately these are the companies that are operating in Malaysia. They want to have an even playing field. They are the ones who are employing Malaysians, deploying capital into the Malaysian ecosystem, and they have a right to have their voice heard.
That's right.
Sense.
As a policymaker yourself, or at least an ex-policymaker, my question to you is that when you look at this situation, do you think it is kind of targeted towards China, has to do with the US-China trade war? Or do you think that it's independent entirely? It is just because of a particular company filing?
I wouldn't say it is totally unrelated to US-China tensions. Because of all this US-China tensions, there are a lot more Chinese companies that being forced to relocate or expand their operations outside China.
Yep.
Many of them come to Southeast Asia, and Malaysia is an attractive destination for different reasons. So I think what we can do as a country, what MITI can do, what others in the ecosystem can do would be to send a signal. Look, we welcome you to come in. You can come in and operate in Malaysia. The best is if you can do some localization so that we can see how you benefit the local ecosystem. And at the same time, don't use Malaysia to go and dump into other countries. Right? Dump into other countries, meaning sell at below cost. And because if let's say this happens, then there will be a lot more scrutiny on these companies that are going to set up or have set up in Malaysia. Right? Not just from US, but maybe from other countries that have this kind of anti-dumping complaints against certain companies.
Right.
Yep.
Would it be good if, let's say, Malaysia come up with a certain kind of initiative where, because now the whole problem of the US-China trade war and Malaysia has become an attractive destination, would it be an attractive proposition for China companies to actually kind of set up their IPs here instead, right? Like instead of making here as an OEM hub, they can place their IP and their knowledge transfer and make it into a Malaysian product per se?
Yeah, so that can be done. And I think a good way to do this would be do some technology transfer and do some JVs with Malaysian companies.
That's right.
They are seen as part and parcel of the local ecosystem or the localized ecosystem.
That's right. Yeah.
Of course, I think Chinese companies are still not used to that kind of way of operating. They still depend very much on China supply chain that they still rely on when they come over here to invest in Malaysia. So, for example, solar PVs, they use the sand or the silica in Malaysia to produce the PV for glass, for example. But some of the other components, do they actually use local electrical components and things like that? No, we are not that sure or that confident that there's that much localization going on. So exactly what you say. If we can find more models like that, I think it would be good, not just for Malaysia in terms of the localization part, but also good for these Chinese companies so that they can prevent these kinds of actions taken against them.
I think there could be some sort of a policy that can come out to encourage this kind of model, right?
Policy and also showcasing some good use cases and good examples.
So my last question is very short only. So do you think this anti-dumping law thing, is it good or bad for the economy?
I think tool that policymakers in each country should be aware of and they should make use of at the right time. So, thanks so much for listening to that very technical discussion, but it's important for the economy and also hopefully you guys would have learned something about this kind of trade issues, strategic trade act, and also anti-dumping issues that are pertinent to the Malaysian economy and also the global economy.
All right, before we go on, we just want to thank Zeus Coffee for sponsoring us for this particular episode.
Thanks to Zeus Coffee once again, where coffee is a necessity, not a luxury. What strikes me is that the consistency is there and also the pricing is very competitive.
That's right, yeah. I was thinking to myself, right, for quite a while, like I've been spending quite a lot with Zeus. We have tried many other coffee brands and what we do realize that the pricing and the taste is just nice. Right at that place.
Sweet spot.
And one thing I do realize that they actually place a lot of importance in their creativity in trying to make different kind of tasting kind of recipe for their coffee. And the one that we have here is actually a coconut latte. So if you like that coconut taste, go and check it out. So thank you very much, Zeus, for sponsoring, and go and get yourself one.
Welcome back, guys, to the Are We OK podcast, where we talk about policies in ways that are relevant to you. And I'm sure this next topic will be relevant to you because we're going to talk about scams.
That's right.
Right. So have you ever been scammed before through all these funny internet scams, telephone call scams and things like that?
Touch wood, not yet.
Okay.
By friends, God.
Sure. I think everyone, you and me, our listeners, definitely would, if, touch wood, hopefully you guys have not been scammed, but you would definitely know of people who have been scammed.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a, recent news of a badminton player in Malaysia who was scammed in a very serious way.
Yes, close to 500,000, I heard.
Yes. So when you read that news, what was your response?
I felt sad because one of the things of running a financial channel is there are quite many people who actually contact us when they get scammed.
Yeah.
And our logo itself is very often being used by scammers to scam, which we have reported to Meta many times.
Yep.
But Meta doesn't take action on it, right? Yeah. So I'm trying to get a blue tick, but they also don't want to give me a blue tick. I don't know why.
Ayo, how come?
Not sure. People with 1,000 followers, they don't want to give me. I don't know why. I think at the same time, aside from Beijing, there's another person who just retiree who got scammed 5 million. Yeah, just like that, right? And I think it's really interesting because I've got scammed before because of friends, relationship, trust you, that kind of things, right? But
at least this one you know the person.
Yeah, at least I know the person. This one is like really a lot of it's just downloading from apps and
you get calls.
Yeah, part-time job scam, investment scam.
Your parcel is in the post.
Yeah.
And then we found that there were some illegal substances in there.
That's right. Yeah.
So I think one interesting result, after this scam issue came up was a suggestion by the former Minister of Finance and also the former DAP Secretary General, now Chairman, Lim Guan Eng, to ask for banks and also telcos to share responsibility for these scam losses. Yeah. So, when you hear that kind of suggestion, and I'll give my views later. Do you think that's something that is worth considering?
At the initial phase, I think we should entertain the idea, and I clap hand to the idea lah.
Yep. In Malaysia, we don't have a framework yet for this. So, for example, if let's say I get a call, I think I've been duped into revealing my passwords and stuff like that, and then suddenly I realize that, oh, this is a scam, right? I want to call the bank, but the call center is down, or somehow I want to have activate some sort of a kill switch, but the app is down.
That's right.
Right, and before I can activate it, this guy has already taken out some money. Right, so in those circumstances where the bank has to help me facilitate me preventing these withdrawals when I realize I've been scammed, there could be ways in which that responsibility is shared or taken up by the bank. Or if let's say the telco doesn't block certain numbers which have been regularly reported as scam numbers, right? And that number is allowed to operate to scam other people and to be used, right? Then maybe the telco bears some responsibility as well. And one interesting thing from our neighbors in down south in Singapore, where the Monetary Authority of Singapore, which is the equivalent of Bank Negara, and their Infocom Media Development Authority, IMDA, which is part and parcel, is like the MCMC. They have published something called the Shared Responsibility Framework, meaning that in some cases, the banks and the telco should bear the cost of these scams, right? So I think it's quite a progressive way of approaching this, whereby a document is published. These two agencies, government agencies, solicited views from the public, from the players involved, whether it's the banks or the telcos. And then, they had a period of feedback. It ended last year. And then now I think they are drafting the necessary laws and regulations to have this. So, do you think it's time for Malaysia to have a similar kind of discussion?
Yeah, some more very fast. Other people draft already, you straight away got reference point. I think you should, because put it this way, most of the time, many of these scams are made alerted to many banks and telcos. Yeah, I mean, just like the same thing when it comes to Meta, you've reported it 1,000,001 times.
Yeah.
And there's clear pattern. I'm not talking about scams where it is not clear. But it seems like they can't be too bothered about it. For one reason is that usually these kind of people who get scammed are very normal people. There's
no VIP.
No VIP, no nothing. No, I think if the same kind of scam happened for a company who is a regular business of theirs, the treatment is generally quite different, right? And as a bank boasting, I mean, the reason why we put our money in bank is because bank claims that they're safe, right? Yeah. So, and everything is digital today. So let's say today if I transfer the money to a bank account because I got scammed, it was allowed to register as a name as Police Diraja Malaysia, right?
Yes.
Which is kind of thing happen, right? They try to prevent it. I know the bank they will try to prevent, but sometimes they say some loophole, right? Maybe extra Zika or something like that. It made them pass through. Then the auntie was too, or uncle was too panicky, kanchong, then just transfer the money. Yes, there's a chance that the person could have just withdrawn immediately from the ATM once they receive. But maybe I think there could be certain kind of measure that is put in place so that the amount that can be frozen immediately, certain bank accounts can be frozen immediately, people related in those registration, because money there's always trail one. And unless you're telling, even pure crypto also got trail, you just can't identify who's the person, right? So it really comes down to whether are they willing to push for it.
So I think right now what is happening is that basically Bank Negara is working with the banks to say, look, you have to warn your customers, and there's a lot of warnings. Even when I use different kind of apps and all that, the warnings are there. But warnings can only go so far. I think when there is money on the line, when the banks actually have to hold certain responsibility, and in this case some telcos as well, they would definitely pay more attention. And Bank Negara actually has a pretty good process whereby if they have any code of conduct, if they have any regulations that affect the financial sector, they will usually publish it openly to get feedback. I've had personal experience on this before. And I think, Bank Negara working together with MCMC, would be a good signal to the larger public that these two institutions actually have a more progressive way and a more proactive way of dealing with the cost of these scams lah.
That's right.
And I applaud Lim Guan Eng for taking this up. But what is interesting is maybe again draw you behind the curtain a bit lah. In terms of next steps, right? It's good that this issue has been publicized, and now we are also looking at the Singapore example. So there are two ministries here, right? One is Ministry of Finance, where has some sort of like a line of sight to Bank Negara, and then the other one, MCMC, falls under the Ministry for Communications, right? So from a sort of like policy and political alignment standpoint, right? There are DAP people in government in both of these ministries. Right, the Deputy Finance Minister is from DAP.
That's right.
Lim Hui Ying happens to be the sister of Guan Eng. And then also the Deputy Minister for Communications is Teo Ni Ching, who's also from the DAP. Right, so I think since Guan Eng has brought this up, it seems reasonable to me. And I'm not sure whether he's done this or not, or whether he will do this, but it seems like quite a reasonable step for him in his capacity as chairman of DAP to work together with the Deputy Minister of Finance, Deputy Minister of Communications, and try to have some sort of a dialogue, internal dialogue, to reach out to these stakeholders, maybe learn from the example of Singapore to see whether we can have that kind of discussion, that kind of, giving some sort of a concept paper and for feedback, so that we can move this discussion to a more progressive place.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, right? Yeah, they both should sit down together, have a chat, and then see what can be done about this.
Yeah. So I mean, for you guys who have been scammed, and also maybe those of you who know people who have been scammed, let us know, in the comments section. When you have notified your banks, maybe the telcos, what has been their response? Were they open? Were they optimistic? Were they trying to help you in ways that are proactive? Or did they just say, oh, there's nothing we can do about it? Basically putting the blame back on you. And if you think that this is a good idea for us to explore, maybe, we can interview some of these people in question, in a later episode.
That's why I think there should be more things that can be done, and I think you all can suggest. But one thing I do see is that I was just thinking about how banks usually respond, because when you were talking about it, I noticed that when it's a credit card scam, they are much faster in responding it, and they are much better at it. My personal take is because I won't pay if let's say then suddenly even the money that's there can be recovered somewhere or another one. But when it's direct via debit card,
much harder
it's
already.
much harder already. So they'll tell you there's nothing I can do.
Yes, that's why this kind of financial interest is something that we need to be aware of. Okay, we'll stop the discussion on the second part here, and then we'll come back. We'll talk about a challenge that I will issue on electoral reform, a challenge that I will issue to PAS as well as Bersatu and Perikatan Nasional. Be right back. Welcome back to part 3 of the Are We OK podcast. And in this section, we're going to do something a little bit different in a sense that I will say something about what I'm going to say at a conference that's happening tomorrow. Right? So, this is recorded on a Thursday. The conference that I'm referring to is a forum that I'll be having together with Bersatu as one of the panelists, talking about the appointment of the Election Commission chairman, which we've spoken about in the past. And this is a forum that other panelists, including the former foreign minister and also former communications minister, Datuk Saifuddin Abdullah, who is also the current MP for Indra Mahkota in Pahang, near Kuantan. He'll also be one of the panelists. So I'm going to say the main point of what I'm going to say tomorrow. So by the time this comes out, I think there may be some press coverage on what myself and others at the forum will say. Right. But I'm going to issue that challenge now, and then I'm going to ask you to respond and ask some of the relevant questions. So my challenge is this. Given the fact that many of the demands of Bersatu after the 15 January election has not been listened to in terms of demands for electoral reform. So things like equal constituency allocation to MPs regardless of whether they are from the opposition or from the government, referring the possible names for the appointment into the election commission, including appointment of the chairman, to the Special Parliamentary Select Committee on Human Rights and also institutional reform, elections and institutional reform, so that they can make the recommendation to the Prime Minister who can bring it to the King. All these things have not been listened to, at least at this point in time. So my challenge to the MPs in Bersatu and PAS, especially the leaders, is why not work together with Bersatu, as a check and balance, to advocate for these kinds of political reforms, so that you can capture more of the middle ground. We know that PN, especially PAS, to a lesser extent Bersatu by default, now probably commands at least 70% of the Malay vote, right? But as we've seen in KKB, the by-election in Kuala Kubu Baru, Bersatu and PAS, they cannot win in many of the mixed seats because they do not have enough support from the middle ground, including the non-Malay community. If you are serious about wanting to reach out and be more inclusive, why not work together with Bersatu to see how you can advocate for these kinds of electoral reforms which would benefit yourselves as PN MPs, maybe through equal constituency allocation, and be able to win more of the middle ground vote, including the non-Malay voters. So that is my challenge to you, and this is the challenge I will issue to YB Saifuddin Abdullah tomorrow, and also the leadership in Bersatu and also PAS. I think that would be an interesting point to start our discussion. When you hear my challenge, what is your initial response?
I think it's very smart. Yeah, if I'm sitting in their position, I think it's a logical choice to make. But it also gets me wondering why, right? So before you take me back the curtain, maybe I'll just make some guess. I think based on what we have talked about a lot earlier, generally a lot of things have two factions, right? I think that within the PN side, there is a faction who will say that, hey, we should remain with a very right wing kind of narrative, right? Because there's this whole idea about you want to win that core votes within that community, and if you try to appear to be more moderate, then would your vote be diluted then? So it's kind of like not taking care of your base while trying to pursue a new ground, right?
Yep.
And I guess to a certain extent, as we urban folks read a lot about like, hey, PAS used to work with Pakatan Harapan and Pakatan Harapan felt betrayed. I'm pretty sure on the other side of the fence, the narrative is same, just a different character, right? Hey, we worked with people like that before, but they betrayed us. Why don't we just stick with our same group, right? So that's part and parcel of the ideas that I have in mind.
I think you're on the right track. So, for example, there are some leaders within Bersatu and also PAS that have used certain electoral reform narratives to try to win more or hold on to the Malay base. So I'll give you a couple of examples. On the PAS side, PAS President Hadi Awang, he has come out many times to say, the non-Malay vote turnout is much higher than the Malay vote. That's why the electoral outcomes are a certain way. So it is unfair to the Malays, which is not accurate at all, looking at the numbers. And many PAS leaders knows this. And then at the same time, on Muhyiddin's side, he has said certain things, including during the Kemamam parliamentary by-election, which PAS easily won. Menteri Besar of Terengganu, Dr. Sam, stood in that seat. And one of the things that Muhyiddin has repeated, not just in that context, but in other contexts as well, is if, let's say, this unity government has the two-thirds majority, they would amend the constitution and increase the number of parliamentary seats to benefit the non-Malays. Because the redrawing of parliamentary constituencies, the exercise should start sometime in 2026. And you need the two-thirds majority to be able to change the number of seats. So he's using that kind of strategy to make the Malay scat, so to speak. And that narrative is actually totally off base and wrong because of a few reasons. Firstly, most of the largest constituencies in Malaysia these days are not non-Malay majority constituencies. It's not like Seputeh, which has not that many voters, less than 150,000, but it's big seats like my former seat of Bangi. There's 51% Malay, 300,000 voters. The second largest seat is Kota Raja. It's a mixed seat, Malay plurality. This is Mat Sabu's seat with about 250,000 voters. You have Shah Alam, you have Gombak, all these Selangor-based seats that are all Malay, a mix, but the largest voting group is actually Malay. At the same time, you also have a number of large seats in places like Tumpat in Kelantan, in Baling in Kedah, and parts of Kedah and also Kelantan, because two delimitation exercises ago, this is before the 2018 delimitation exercise. It was the one in around 2010, around that time. There were no seats added in the PAS states. So, PAS actually also can benefit from the increase in these parliamentary seats in their own states where they are strong in. Right? So, because of leaders like Hadi Awang, because of leaders like Muhyiddin, they still obviously hold a lot of influence within their party. I think that kind of a narrative does not make it easy for their parties to want to try to work together with Bersih to try to capture the middle ground. Right. So do you sort of like see how that ties in with your own understanding of the kind of different factions within the parties?
And it got worse. It's like it just went one level deeper of it's gonna be harder to solve now.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if let's say there are more reasonable leaders, people like Saifuddin Abdullah and maybe Taqiyuddin Hassan, the Secretary General of PAS, that can see a possible movement towards this middle ground. And if you think about it, Bersih 1.0, some of the leaders in Bersih 1.0 were from PAS at that time. And at that time, PAS was part of Pakatan Rakyat. So when we went down to the streets and all that,
I remember.
Of course, many of those PAS leaders are now in Amanah, people like Dr. Zul, Mat Sabu and all that. But that kind of sentiment of wanting to seek greater fairness and whatnot, it could still be a powerful and relevant narrative.
Oh yeah, I recall at the point when we saw, when I saw like PAS went down the ground together, you really felt like it's Malaysia.
Yes, correct.
You really felt like it's Malaysia. You felt that like everything doesn't matter anymore. It's just we are people of one
common
country.
Cause.
We are here for a common cause.
Wanting to seek for more fairer sort of like electoral rules.
That's right. Yeah. Right? And that gave me that moment where I was like, actually PAS is not that bad because they are very moderate, and it's not like they are gonna, the whole idea about a green wave.
That was not something that was a big fear factor at that time.
There was no more fear factor put it there lah. I mean, it wasn't a problem at all.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I mean, just to further the argument, one of the things that PAS and even some Bersatu leaders, they always make use of the opportunity to sort of like wave certain narratives would be the issue of local elections. Right? So whenever local elections come up, there will be certain factions within PAS, and Hadi Awang is one of them, that comes out to say, this is a way for the non-Malays to try to take control of the urban areas where the non-Malays are in the majority. And in fact, this was the sentiment that Dr. Mahathir himself expressed when he was the Prime Minister for the second time. And people like Chin Tong, myself, we had to go and correct him, internally, to say that actually the reality of the matter is that in most of the urban areas, even in places like, where we're at now, Kota Damansara, Shah Alam, Gombak, even places like Subang, the plurality of residents, if not the majority, are actually Malays.
Actually, yes.
Yes.
Actually, yes.
So there's no question of non-Malays trying to use local elections to take control of these local councils, and at the same time the composition or the staffing of the local councils are still majority predominantly Malay. Even in a place like PJ Subang, the staff of MPPJ, the staff of MPSJ, it's I would safely say 80-90% Malay. Right? So that kind of narrative, I think, is not very helpful. it really sort of like plays into this kind of the politics of racial sentiment,
Yep.
right? And I think if let's say there are open-minded enough leaders in Bersatu and PAS who can, try to move away from that narrative, and maybe even if they can do that, then the avenues, in terms of working with civil society organizations, including Bersih, would be much greater.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and I'll give you another example that would also benefit Bersatu in a more direct way. Recently, Bersatu has issued letters to inform 6 of their MPs and also one of their state assemblymen in Terengganu to say that after the constitutional change in Bersatu, because you've made the decision to support the Prime Minister, in exchange for constituency allocation, you automatically lose your seat. You automatically lose your party membership. And because of that, you violated the anti-hopping law. And because of that, you have lost your seat. And your seat should be declared vacant by the speaker in Dewan Rakyat as well as in Selangor. And we should have by-elections in these seats. And that is probably a position where, if you ask Bersih or if you ask some of the NGOs in civil society, they will probably support.
Yeah.
Because it's in the spirit of the anti-hopping law.
Yeah.
Right? But because I think Bersatu, they see the civil society actors as people whom they don't have a working relationship with, then the outreach, the opportunity to want to work together with them on some of these common causes, on electoral reform, on political reform, is lost already.
Yeah, I think there's a huge challenge to that because from what I've observed so far with a lot of this kind of thing is that it's usually very emotionally fueled, right? From what I've seen. Whatever you mentioned just now requires a lot of logical thinking where when you become emotional,
correct,
it doesn't like there's it's a very simple thing, right? When you watch Game of Thrones or you watch any form of studies of warfare, right? They always say this one thing: the best way to unite the people is to have a common enemy. Yeah, it's never logical thinking. It is never for the greater benefit. It is always for the common enemy, and that usually is the most low level way of mobilizing people and cause the most harm, but give you the immediate influence.
Yeah. So in before GE15, before GE14, that common foe was Barisan Nasional and also Najib because of 1MDB.
That's right.
Right. So I think right now, I don't think there's this kind of common foe yet. But if let's say, we see the handling of these kinds of issues to do with political reform and even the economy gravitating towards one of dissatisfaction with the current government, maybe that kind of alignment can be had. But it requires a lot of strategic thinking and action on the part of the current opposition parties. And
That's
I'm not sure they have enough of that kind of strategic thinking and action at this point in time.
Well, so that's why the easiest way to play with it is a race card and religion card, right?
Yes, which I think they think, leaders in Bersatu and PAS think that this will help them towards winning the next general election. And that strategy may work, but like I said, looking at some of the mixed seats, KKB, others, if they cannot win the middle ground, if they cannot win at least 10 to maybe 20% of the non-Malay votes, I think it will be very difficult for them to achieve their objective in the next general election.
Yep.
And also, I think it will also be difficult for them to have common cause with the parties from Sabah and Sarawak. Right, so we'll see what happens, at the conference, at the forum tomorrow, when I issue this challenge to see whether Dato' Saifuddin will respond, and also whether or not it will be reported in the press and maybe go out to leaders in PAS and Bersatu who may consider this and think about this as a possible strategy towards the next general election. And of course, to my friends in Pakatan Harapan, remember you guys, I was there with you when we went down to the ground to stand in solidarity with the Bersih movement from Bersih 1 up to Bersih 5. So I hope that you won't forget the promises that we made during that time and maybe use this as a push and a reason for more electoral reform to be put in place before the next general election, so that you can give a reason for your supporters, for Pakatan Harapan supporters, to continue to come out to cast their vote in favor of the reform agenda. So be right back after this for our final segment. Hey guys, welcome back to the final segment of this episode of the Are We OK podcast. And we're going to shift the focus from Malaysia to other countries, and in particular, two of the largest democracies in the world. Firstly, South Africa, that conducted their elections in May of this year. And then after that, we're going to talk about the announcement of the results of the Indian parliamentary elections as well. So let's start with South Africa. For the elections this year, it is the first time in post-apartheid history that the African National Congress, better known as the ANC, failed to win a majority of votes and seats in parliament. As a result, they are forced to look for coalition partners to form the next government, including the possibility of working together with the largest opposition party called the Democratic Alliance that won the second largest number of votes and also seats. Yeah, let's start with South Africa. When I talk about the African National Congress or ANC, what is the first thing that comes to your mind?
Unfortunately, I'm not very familiar with the South Africans.
Okay, which is the leader that you think of when I talk about this political party?
I would think of Nelson Mandela.
Correct.
Immediately, my mind was Nelson Mandela.
Correct. So, he was the president of South Africa, the first president of South Africa after the first post-apartheid elections in 1994, which ANC won in a landslide over, I think, close to 70% of the votes and seats. And I think he was the symbol of the ANC at that time.
That's right.
But over time, ANC became a party that was riddled with corruption, a lot of cronyism, a lot of contracts, a lot of abuse of power, and their popularity started to drop. And there were many people who were already saying that ANC will not be able to win 50% of the vote and seats because they practice a proportional representation system. When the results came out, it was worse than expected for them. It was like 40% of the popular vote, which means 40% of the seats. So when this kind of situation comes up, including possible post-election coalitions, right? Do you see some similarities between what's happening in South Africa and what happened in Malaysia?
I was about to say that there's some odd similarities in the first half of the story, at least. And I remember at one point there was this whole hoo-ha in the media where they kind of put our PMX like the Nelson Mandela of Malaysia a little bit, right? Yeah, and that's where the first half of the story is. The question is that will the second half of the story follow suit? But I am grateful that we are still in the very, very early stage of the first half, where there can be still a lot of influence be made for the next 20 years down the road.
Yeah, so, just to sort of like highlight to the audience, right? The second largest party is called the Democratic Alliance. And they started out as a party mostly catering to the white voters. Right, the white voters in South Africa are also quite diverse. They have the Boer speaking or Dutch speaking, white voters, and then they also have the English speaking white voters. They have also the coloured community, mixed race community, people coming from South Asia as well, in that support base.
And it's called
Democratic Alliance or DA.
So it's also Democratic Alliance Party in a way.
and they have been in the government of this province called the Western Cape.
Right.
And that's where Cape Town is. And what the Western Cape is the only non-black majority province in South Africa. Right. So, do you see some similarities there, between this democratic alliance?
Sound like a state with P.
Yeah, so similar to maybe Penang and the DAP. Right. So it'd be quite interesting if, let's say, they were to form a government together with the ANC, similar to what we see here in Malaysia today. And I think there will be some challenges as well that they will find similar, in the sense that once you go together in government with ANC, a lot of the things that you talked about as the largest opposition party in terms of wanting to have a more transparent, less corrupt system, once you are sort of like, quote unquote, in bed with the enemy, how much of your reform agenda will be sort of like reduced.
That's right.
Or not so amplified. Similar to what we see here in our own government.
That's right.
Once PH, DAP are in the same government with UMNO, then, the narrative changes a bit.
That's right. So it's the question of which battle are you going to pick, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And they say, you may win the battle, you may lose the war, so you got to be a little bit careful in that.
Yeah, and also then the question goes to ANC as well, If let's say this signal has been sent by the voters to you, to what extent are you able to reform yourself so that you can get back into political relevance or win back some of the support that you've lost before, failing which your support may even go down further.
Yep.
And that will be also a good parallel or good lesson to the large, what used to be the largest party in Malaysia, notably UMNO, right?
Yep. A lot of similarities.
There. Yeah. So it will be interesting to see. The markets actually want a government between ANC and also the Democratic Alliance for political stability, because some of the other parties, the smaller parties that won enough seats to form the government with ANC, they are seen as rather populist parties that also does not have such a good record of governance. Because the third largest party, the head of the third largest party is actually the former president called Jacob Zuma, who led a sort of like a Zulu-based party, and he himself was convicted of corruption charges and whatnot, and generally not somebody that governed South Africa very well. Right. So, that's an interesting story to tell, and we'll continue to watch that space and give you updates in future episodes. Then the other election results that came out that was significant, I thought, was in India.
Yeah.
Right. So initially, people thought, Prime Minister Modi's party, the BJP, would repeat its performance in the previous election and maybe even do better. Right, they won, easily a majority, 300 seats out of more than 500 seats in the previous election.
That's right.
And people thought he was just going to walk through the whole thing.
It looked like it was going to be the case. Yes.
But when the results came out, Prime Minister Modi's party, the BJP, failed to win a majority. They failed to win more than 270 seats, which is what you needed to get past the line, 272 if I'm not mistaken. But together with their coalition partners, they managed to get across the line, and they will form the next government. Prime Minister Modi will be the next Prime Minister, his third term. But I think with a reduced majority and also maybe take away some of that momentum. So yeah, from your perspective, what is your take on the election results in India?
Reminds me of before 2018, that election. I still recall the time everyone was not very happy, but things were still going, and in the end, BN won at the point. It was like,
2013.
But it was still a shocker because it's not as majority as they thought.
Not as big as they thought.
But there was still this whole, we are unbeatable, we are invincible, and this scenario sounds exactly the same.
So it's a good, I guess, warning to Prime Minister Modi's BJP party. There have been accusations to say that Prime Minister Modi is over dominant, not maybe wanting to listen to enough people, and also to get his cabinet colleagues involved. So I'm not sure to what extent that dictated or influenced the election results. But definitely, there will be more room for the opposition to make its voice clearer. And also, I think, even as Prime Minister Modi has to govern for a third term to see what new initiatives he needs to come up with, take advantage of this US-China tensions, it's also, I think, interesting to watch whether or not the opposition parties, because they've united under a new alliance, led by Congress, to see whether the Congress party will be able to have a new narrative, reform itself, to be of relevance again.
That's right.
Because the Congress party in India used to be the equivalent of UMNO in Malaysia, right? So, they fell out of power, they're replaced by another party, and, this is part and parcel of what democratic politics is about.
Yep. I think it's really interesting because, because of this particular episode, I also just catch up on the latest reading on the Economist. Yeah, so they wrote an article on this, and I thought it was really interesting because I think one of the most, like in Malaysia, we have the question about races and so on, but I think in India, it was a question of Hinduism versus Islam, right? And he is from the party of Hinduism, nationalist, right?
Yes.
And so now the question is, again, the similar situation, right? Do I still go stronger with that stance?
Yes.
Or do I learn to work with other people and focus on a more better optics and tone of democracy? Because they're actually in a very good position now, actually, having said that, because of US-China trade war.
The economy is growing.
Yeah, US is like, hey, please go and beat China.
But investors are going in.
Yeah, investors are going in, but you gotta keep the democratic side up, because if you don't, it's gonna be difficult a bit. So,
which again is a good lesson in terms of a good reminder that this kind of racial politics or religious politics can only take you this far.
That's right.
Because there's the middle ground that will push back.
That's right. Yeah, because now he has that problem, right? Go too much, he lose his become moderate, he may lose his base.
So what kind of balancing act do you have?
Like
and I think one of the interesting things that I read about the electoral outcome in India was the constituency, which was the site of this very famous mosque in Ayodhya, that was demolished in a sort of like riot, and Hindu temple was rebuilt over that same spot. That particular constituency, which is a Hindu majority constituency, BJP actually lost that seat.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's also a reminder that this kind of religious or racial politics can sometimes have a backfire kind of approach, lah.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah. I think one thing, I think politicians have to understand. This is where I think is really interesting. He's currently 70 over years old, right? Yeah, and again, it's a very similar situation in Malaysia where a young politician is usually in their 50s to 60s. Veteran politicians.
Yeah.
So which is okay. Yeah. So you're supposed to be enjoying life in retirement, not fighting for power at this point. Which Malaysia is oddly similar in that situation. And I think they have to understand the logic that today with social media, people are much more informed. And it's not like last time where you can 100% control information flow.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think this would have worked very well back then when all publications were controlled by government. Yes, you can still push the extreme. Algorithm may still push the extreme in the social media world today, but variables of it going wrong and turning into a backfire is way higher.
Yeah.
So be very careful with this strategy, whatever country you're in, including Malaysia, right?
And that applies to those in government here in Malaysia and also those in opposition.
Yep.
Right. So it's a good reminder, to look for ways to look at the middle ground, to solve, real problems experienced by people, and to manage the economy well and to deliver on your promises, including some of the promises on electoral and institutional reform. That would be good for the country, irrespective of who is in power.
Yeah. If the people want to join that forum tomorrow, is it open for public?
Yes, it's at the Kuala Lumpur Selangor Chinese Assembly Hall. I'm not sure whether by the time this episode airs, it would be maybe after.
Yeah, that's
but
right.
you probably can watch it online because I'm sure that they will live stream it, and then it will probably be news items would pick up some of the more exciting parts, including maybe my challenge, and I think Bersatu will also issue a statement and also have some of these recordings up on their website as well. So thanks for all your support. We've reached over 20,000 subscribers already, and we want to keep the momentum going and also introduce more interesting content for you guys to enjoy. So we'll see you in the next episode of
Are we okay?